Welcome back to All Star Quilts. I'm Eleanor Burns. Well, the last time I introduced the feathered star and explained that I was having my students make their new quilt without seeing it first as a mystery quilt. Well, celebrity Mary Ann Fonz assisted in making the first star, and the students were off, blindly making a 68-inch square quilt. It was a lot of fun. Well, the final results for Mary Lou Curtis's quilt are stunning. The feathered star and center medallion in rich jewel tone violet draws the eye in. Well, she named the quilt Night and Day for the dark studded star in the fabrics and then the bright yellow for the sun. Well, the fussy cut center in Mary Ann's star almost looks like it's smiling at us. It's just so cute. And then the little stars use the same lavender fabric plus a bright pink, which just ties the stars all together. Judy Jackson long arm quilted Mary Lou's creation. It's very nice. She has light and airy corners, and then half of the design is repeated in each triangle. Well, Mary Lou pieced the back, and the quilting really shows up nice on the purple star fabric. And her label is quite simple. It's everything you need. Night and Day Quilt, top piece by Mary Lou Curtis, quilted by Judy Jackson, July 2014. So everybody will remember and know about Mary Lou's quilt. That's wonderful. Well, this quilt by Marie Gibbons looks like a two-color quilt. But you know, actually, she used 3 different reds and 3 different neutrals, plus fussy cuts. Well, the turkey red stars just shine so bright, she named it The General, after the fabric line French General. And her use of the soft hands makes her quilt reminiscent of tones used in antique quilts. Well, Marie's friend, Sandy Bobar, did a beautiful job, starting with the elegant design in the middle of the snowball block to points in the feathers, just working out. Well, then the same design in a smaller scale is repeated in Nancy's star. You know, this would just look right in a colonial home. Just beautiful. And the quilting on the back is absolutely fantastic. But we have such good long arm quilters that help us. Well, Aiko's quilt also has a colonial feel. Aiko Rogers named it Home of the Brave, using Old Glory shades in red, tan, and blue. This is also such an old-fashioned looking patriotic quilt. You know, stars as a patriotic symbol have been part of our history since the beginning of the 20th century. It's amazing. Sherry McCrow did the long arm quilting for Aiko. Well, Sherry did feathered wreaths in the corner squares and double feathers in the border. This is just great for a 4th of July party. Wonderful. Well, this all-star quilt is also reminiscent of an antique quilt. Diane Edgman achieved the illusion by using a muted palette of red, blue, and tan with cream highlights. Diana loves the Kansas Trouble fabric line. She can't get enough of it. Her feathered star is enhanced by the prominent dark brown borders, and then she also framed the stars with dark blue triangles. Really sets it off. Diana did her own quilting in an edge-to-edge design. You know, this quilt would look great in my log home, should I ask. Well, enough chatting. Let's get on with it. When Alex visited my class at the webinar, she thought no one would recognize her in red glasses. Well, she had great fun, just sneaking around, hiding out. But these red glasses really do have a purpose. Now, when you put them on and look at your quilt, you can see value. Now you want to look for values that are evenly spaced throughout the quilt. I see my peacock in the center, and the snowball, and in the stars, and then again in the outside edge. That peacock is evenly dispersed throughout the quilt. No big dark blotches of dark altogether. Now here is Alex's star. There's 2 pinks, 1 peacock, and 1 background. It's just 2 of those with 1 Marianne star. You know, they are only 4 inches square. They are almost miniature blocks, but they're great fun to do. Well, the blocks in this cute little wall hanging were made from 1 5-inch charm pack. I spent one Sunday afternoon making 12 little blocks, and then I set it together with solid squares and side triangles. And then I added a striped border, and the corners are charming little birds. So much fun. Well, I ran over to Mary Jo's that afternoon, and she quilted stars in the block. And then there's little flowers in the solid squares. And I love the little red polka dot binding. That is the final touch. You know, these little red glasses are also great for when you make a scrappy quilt and you have all different values of blocks. If you just put these on when you're laying out the quilt, it really helps you. Better to use the glasses now and then not be disappointed later when everything is bunched together. I've learned. Well, this is the block, the 2 pinks, and then there's a piece square made out of the peacock and the background. This is a 1.5-inch square background. So I have my 2 squares, the background and the peacock for the piece squares. Place them right sides together. I'm moving. Then draw an X on your 2 squares, right sides together, and just so, a 1/4-inch seam on both sides. Now, since this is 4 inches, I'm going to just use my little miniature ruler. This works great for these small things. Line up 2 inches, cut it in half one way, pick up your ruler, turn it, cut it the other way. You've cut it into 4 pieces. Now just put your diagonal line, cut that, and then 1 more diagonal line so that you actually have 8 little triangles. Now these are squared up to 1.5 inches. And I like to use this ruler. This is our 4.5-inch triangle square up ruler. This is the 1.5-inch line. I put glow line tape just underneath that red line. I'm going to show you 2 methods for squaring up. The first one is my favorite method. I'm just going to take one of these pieces. I like to just take and put the 1.5-inch line right on the stitches, right along there. Grab your ruler. There's very little to trim. You're just going to go up one side and turn down the other. And then before you're finished, just take your cutter and angle cut off those corners. And then all you have to do is press it open to the dark side. So let's just hold on to this and let's take one that we haven't squared up yet, and you'll get to see both methods. Okay, so I like to just drop the dark on the top, set the seam, open, and press right in there. And I really like to just try to get that seam so it doesn't stretch. This is all bias. But the second one, you press it open before you square it up. Now this is the method that Sue really likes for her miniatures. Patty likes it, Teresa likes it, so I'll show you the second method and you can decide which one you like. Okay, it's pressed open, so you still take that line and put it up on the seam. Line it up right with the seam. That's going right down through the middle. You have that same little amount to trim off. Well, we only did one side, so we have to turn it around and then just repeat that same step on the second side. The reason that I like the other way is because you only make 2 cuts. This time I'm making 4, but the ladies think this one might be more accurate. You can test both and find out. Now, all we have to do is add our 1.5-inch squares right to that piece square. Add the 1.5 inch square, press the seam toward the square. Well, I did some already. I'm just trying to get right through this. And once they're all chained like this, I have a cool little gizmo that has a razor blade in it. So it really works good for cutting these pieces apart. Now you can replace the razor blade and make it sharp again. So that's the unit that I need for my blocks. In this next step, we're going to use the rectangles of the light pink and the dark pink. They are 1.5 inches by 2.5 inches. Now you have to place a 1.5 inch square right sides together to the rectangle and sew on that diagonal line. This is what it looks like. Sew on the diagonal line. Now, you could do it one of two ways. You could mark all of your 1.5 inch squares with that line. Just put your square wrong side up and use sandpaper because then everything will just stick. It doesn't move at all. It is unbelievable how nice that sandpaper is. But make a really light line, one that you're not going to be able to see on the other side. So then once you make that line, you can just pick it up and just position it right on your rectangle, and it's ready for sewing. Or you could not mark all your lines and also get your sewing done. This is a piece of plastic that I have taped down so it doesn't move. We can sew straight on this, just following these marked lines. Now take your 1.5 inch by 2.5 inch rectangle and just place your 1.5 inch square right sides together to it. And you slide it up until the tip of that square is right against that needle. And right here you put the tip on this line going right down along there. Let's see if I can do this. Show you how to work it without getting my hands in the way. So you just start sewing and you keep guiding the tip of that square right against that diagonal line. And when you come back out, you want to just go right through that corner again. So once you get going on, it's just great assembly line. Just place the next one and just keep on going. Line up the corner right on the tip. Keep the tip right here. Just keep on going. And you can see your rectangle following these diagonal lines as you go right down along. So this way, you can just sit and assembly line sew and get all of these done. So this is what it looks like right here with the diagonal line sewn. And now you can just take, you might as well just keep a couple of them as long as your ruler will go. Put the 1/4 inch line along that stitch and just cut off those tips. Oh my gosh, that would be really great in some kind of a miniature quilt. Sue actually sews those together. And then all you have to do is just press toward the background. Let me just take these two. They are so cute. Actually, I do like to make little miniatures myself. They're great to use in my log home. They're fun decorators. Perfect. They go right out to the point. So now you have to make 2 of the medium pink and 2 of the dark pink. And you're just going to take your piece that we already made. This point always goes at the opposite end. So I'm going to sew 2 medium pink, 2 dark pink together, and I'll show you how to sew the block together. Did you ever notice how you take all these little pieces and you sew them together, and then all of a sudden you lay them all out in order and you look at it and you go, wow, that looks really cool. So it's just so fun. Little block. I want to sew this vertical row here, so just take it, flip it right sides together, and just zip right down along there. The fun thing is that there are no seams that you have to match. It would be nice if you kind of lined up those points, but it doesn't seem to matter on this. It is pretty amazing about how well it goes together. Now, did you know that Alex Anderson did a 14-year stint as hostess on Simply Quilts. That is amazing. And I do remember I went on Alex's show a couple of times with her, and we always had a great time. I'll never forget the first time I tore a strip, and her director said, "Okay, stop." He thought something happened to his microphones, but it was just me ripping my strips. Okay, so now there's the vertical seam. So when you take it and you fold it the opposite way, you're going to go this way. It lays better if you push this seam down. Usually I say push this top seam up. Well, it just doesn't lay good. So you push this seam down, and the one underneath you push up. And I'm just going to lock that together so it works really good. And then not only did she do that long stint as hostess, but Alex and Ricky actually started the first online video web TV called The Quilt Show, available for quilters worldwide. That is just pretty amazing. There are so many great things that we've done. And I think this story, I always tell the story about Orion, but he says I have it all wrong because he was so enamored with Alex that he asked her to sign the shoulder on his t-shirt. And then he wouldn't wash his t-shirt. And I'm going, remember your mother's a star too. But he got Alex's t-shirt. Okay, so now at this seam, instead of swirling to the right, we are going to swirl to the left. I'm going to need my scissors and my stiletto to get that open. Just clip that connecting seam right there. There, we've got that. So push the top one to the left, swirl counterclockwise. And then when you get to the middle and go up, everything counterclockwise, then it opens up perfect, and you can just press that seam. Very, very cute. And you can even see that little four patch right in the center. Perfect. Now that we have Alex's stars done, we can go ahead and start setting one part of this quilt together. This is Mary Ann's star with two Alex's stars. Now, if you're using a fussy cut on Mary Ann's star, remember you lay out these four corner triangles with the fussy cuts always right side up. It's just going to be really easy to do. Now, if you don't want to have as large a quilt as this one, you can just make these triangles and add them to the corners of just the feathered star. It's a beautiful wall hanging. Judy Jackson did the quilting on it. Teresa pieced it. And if you look, there's just beautiful feather medallions in each one of the corners. The quilting is exquisite. I love it. Now, just think, we're already starting to put this quilt together. Now, to set the triangles around here, you need to have one 7-inch square for two of the Alex stars. So just cut them on both diagonals right here. Cut the square on both diagonals, and you're just going to place them like this, starting in the corners. Okay, so once you've got them placed, stack them up. You can do all 8 if you want, and just flip this right sides together. Line it up at the square top, and I like to have the piecing on the top so you can be sure and do it. Okay, so just sew right along here. You've got a tip hanging out on the bottom, and once you have one side, just go ahead, cut your threads, and add the triangle to the opposite side. See, it's all lined up right there. It's just going to go right here, like so. You know, both Alex and I did get a very funny letter. It was a copy of a letter from a young mother that had a new baby that did not want to sleep. And the mother found out that the only way that she could get this little baby to sleep was if she took her into the living room. She didn't want to hear any noise. The baby didn't want to hear any noise, but it was okay to have the television on. So the mother found out. as long as she had a quilting program with closed caption on it, just the light of the TV, and the mother could watch the quilting show all night while the baby slept in her arms. So I just wonder if she's going to end up being a quilter herself, huh? Pretty good. So now I have the 2 triangles on. I press the seams towards the big triangles right here in the bottom edge. Just go ahead, square those off, get rid of those little tips, and then you have another square. It's 4 inches square. Cut it on one diagonal. This is the triangle that's going to go right in the very bottom of it. Just flip it right sides together. You don't have a lot. It's not real generous. So let's just flip it over and see if we have equal tips hanging out. It's always good to have equal tips hanging out. And go ahead, just sew the triangle on the bottom edge. And that's pretty simple. You're going to do this to all 8. You have one little bit of squaring up. So take this right now, set the seam, open, and press it. And this right now is squared up to 9.5 inches. Just take the 9.5 inch triangle square up ruler. All we want to do is really trim off the edges. So line up the line right along here, the 9.5 inches, just such a little bit. Make sure you don't trim off your seam allowance. Perfect. Now, this is going to go right along the edge. You add this to Marianne's star, flip it, press it out, flip it, press it out. And then you have to add some borders to it. And Teresa already did this one for me. She took and one strip. She's very economical. She said, "Elle, you've got to do this with one strip." Okay. So one strip has already been added, and so that you can use the other end, just go ahead and line up. Let's get this right. Okay. Line up. Okay, now I have it. Line up the diagonal line with the edge of the ruler, and you can just go ahead and cut a diagonal line. Perfect. Now, go to the top edge. Up here, here's the salvage edge. Line this up, trim this off, and now you can just take this leftover strip, turn it around like this, match it up at the corner, sew this, and look, you've got a little bit left at the end. You can just trim that off. You'll have these great corners. I love to use 5-inch charm squares for my little quilts because you get such variety in the prints, in the scales of the prints, the colors of the prints, the variety. It's just wonderful for a scrappy looking quilt. And this way, you don't have to dig all through your sewing room, mess it up, just looking for different fabrics. It works great. Now, remember when I did this part of the patch? These were little 1.5-inch piece squares. Well, you can still take your 5-inch squares. Don't bother to cut them back to 4 inches. Just start out with 5-inch, put a 5-inch background, right sides together to a 5-inch medium. And then just do the same thing. Draw the diagonal lines, make your X, so a 1/4-inch seam, cut it into 8 pieces, and square it up to 1.5 inches. That's easy. And then for this part, remember our rectangles? We had 1.5 by 2.5 inch pieces. So I have 2 different varieties here. I have a dark pink and a turquoise. Just go ahead and cut this into 1.5 inch strips. You can get one, move it over, and cut a second one. And this can be scraps or just start your next quilt. And then once you have your 1.5 inch strips cut, turn your ruler the other way and cut into 2.5 inch pieces. From those two, you'll get 2 little patches alike. It's just fun. So sew your patches. This little quilt has 12 stars in it. And when you lay them out, you lay them 3 across and 4 down. Now the setting squares are 7.5 inches. Cut them on both diagonals, and those are going to go right around the corners like this. And then the corner triangles are 5-inch squares. Cut those on one diagonal and just put those in the corners. And when you sew the rows together, just always sew vertical rows like this, and then press the seams toward the background, away from the star points. And then I picked this little border. I think this is so fun. It will add a lot of brightness, make it very festive looking. Cute. So, whatever you do, I just want you to have fun. Have fun, play, dance around, have a good time, and enjoy your quilting.